Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of the CI Chit Chat. We're here every single Tuesday morning at 7:45 Central answering your questions about carbon intensity, these tax credits. And today I'm going to hang out here for an hour. Feel free to hang out and stay with me as long as you would like. As always, this is recorded. We can clip it up, send it out. We've got a ton of material that we'll continue to post from last week's webinar as well. And all of this will end up on our YouTube page, the Continuum Ag YouTube page, and on the TopSoil podcast. So be sure to check it out there or share it with other people. So to start, my name is Mitchell Hora. I'm the founder and CEO here at Continuum Ag. I'm a farmer from Southeast Iowa. Started Continuum Ag, and we're a software company that's helping farmers to get their carbon intensity scores, help to get verified, because as the IRS laid out, it's going to have to be legit, have to be verified. It's going to take a lot of data to really make this rock and roll. So we will continue to walk you through all of that, make sure that you are at the forefront of all this and for on your own farm or the farmers that you are interacting with. So to start, as we always do, what the heck is this whole carbon intensity CI thing, right? So CI is the acronym for carbon intensity. Carbon intensity is essentially it's a unit of measure specifically utilized by the Department of Energy and utilized in the fuel space, but it's the consistent unit of measure to compare the carbon footprint, essentially the carbon footprint of different fuels and different energy sources. So you can utilize the standard unit of measure, carbon intensity, to compare ethanol versus regular fossil fuel gasoline, compare jet fuel versus sustainable aviation fuel, but also compare just different types of fuels, looking at ethanol versus diesel versus biodiesel and everything in between. Part of the overall carbon footprint or carbon intensity of these fuels, part of the footprint comes from the feedstock, meaning what was utilized to produce the actual fuel. And that's where we fit in on the farm as corn soybean producers, that the corn soybean that we're producing, if it's going into the biofuel supply chains, our carbon footprint is now part of their carbon footprint. And so there's tax credits that are incentivizing this to happen. The tax credit we're mostly going to continue to clear up today is 40B. It's sustainable aviation fuel only. And its production in 2023 and 2024 only. So it's almost done. End of this year, it sunsets, it goes away. Sustainable aviation fuel then follows underneath the tax credit 45Z. 45Z is not only for sustainable aviation fuel, but any other transportation biofuel as well. So sustainable aviation fuel, ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, and so a variety of different fuels, which is why we like it, right? Sustainable aviation fuel today, very, very small market, very early. Clearly, this administration wants to scale it up. Clearly, the airlines also really want to help to scale it up. But 45Z we like because it's not only sustainable aviation fuel, it's ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel. And about a third of the U.S. corn crops goes to ethanol every year. So out of the 15 or so million bushels that we produce every year, 5.4 million bushels of corn goes to ethanol. And that ethanol can be used to create sustainable aviation fuel, which is what the IRS laid out last week. There's a pathway there. It's called alcohol to jet. You can also utilize HEFA, which is a soybean oil based product, and you can utilize that to create sustainable aviation fuel as well. So the quick recap on last week's stuff. It's a great indicator as to what's to come with 45Z, and I'll continue to dig into that. We learned that they didn't just completely annihilate us on indirect land use change, which is a huge win. I've talked a lot about indirect land use change in these CI Chit Chats over the last multiple months. I thought that it was going to go up significantly. It was at a 7.4 CI point. So out of the ethanol score, which is typically a 55 or so, out of the 55, 7.4 of the points came from indirect land use change, and about 29 points coming from the corn. Well, we thought that 7.4 might go up by like a lot, and it didn't. So that's a huge win. And it doesn't just tank this whole thing, which is great. So full speed ahead. The other things that they did, though, they did not update the feedstock calculator, which is the tool that's utilized to quantify the actual footprint of the corn and soybeans. They did not update that, but a lot of indication that they will update it later on this year. Okay, so, but they did not do it for right now. Instead, what they said is for 40B, we're not going to use the GREET feedstock calculator. Instead, we're going to create this new concept of a climate smart ag pilot project farmer. To be a verified climate smart ag farmer, you have to be doing cover crop, no-till, and use nutrient stabilizers. For corn, you have to use cover crops and no-till for soybeans. So it's instead of utilizing the score, like what we've been running, like we've been talking about here, instead of using your actual score, they said, here's the 3 practices you have to do for corn. Here's the 2 practices you have to do for soybeans. If you do these 3 practices on corn, we'll grant you 10 CI points of reduction. If you do these 2 practices on soybeans, we'll grant you 5 CI points of reduction. And I wanted to start with clarifying that last week I did the math wrong, and I need to get it clarified and get it recorded and get it put out there. So let me walk through that here just a little bit and share with you guys. So the 40B math, to simplify it, and I'm going to walk through this 2 different times, I think, but for every single point that the maybe I don't want to do it like that. For every point that we reduce the CI score in 40B, the 40B value is essentially 3.5 cents per CI point per gallon of SAF. Okay, so if therefore you get 10 CI points of reduction for doing CSA, so if you use CSA corn, that equals 10 CI points. 10 points times 35 means that therefore you get a credit of 35 cents per gallon. Okay, so if you're using this CSA corn, you get 10 CI points. Simplifying things, it's worth 3.5 cents per point, therefore 35 cents a gallon. What I screwed up last week is we need to take that 3.5 divided by 1.7 gallons of ethanol per gallon of SAF. So therefore you take the 35 cents divided by 1.7, that equals about 20 cents or so. Let me make sure I don't screw it up again. Divide that by 1.7. So every single point, or therefore the value per gallon is 20.6, 20.6 cents per gallon of ethanol. Then you take that times, we'll use the easy math of 1 bushel of corn equals 3 gallons of ethanol, which is what most ethanol plants are today. I think the national average is 2.9. Historically, we've used the really conservative math of 2.7, but for easy math here today, I'll use the 3. So if we take I'll use the 20.6 cents times 3, 61.8 cents per gallon. So therefore the value is 61.8 cents per bushel of corn produced. And then, of course, that's the total value of the tax credit, 61 cents. And I edit this? There we go. So 61 cents per bushel of corn. then the farmer gets a portion of that. Right. So the farmer gets a portion, the ethanol company gets a portion, the sustainable aviation fuel producer gets a portion. Okay, so say from there it gets a third to the farmer, a third to ethanol, a third to SAF, basically 20 cents per bushel for each one. So that's why, I've been saying I believe that 20 cents a bushel to do cover crops, no-till, and nutrient stabilizers on your nitrogen, I don't think we're going to move the needle that much for only 20 cents to do all three of those practices. Now, if you're already doing all three of those practices and you can get an extra 20 cents, okay. If you're going 200 bushel corn, we're talking what, $40 an acre? Like, all right, we'll take that. $40 an acre, and it's going to take, $5 an acre or whatever, like through our process to get that data documented, get it verified, get it moved. Okay, so spend 5 to make 40. That sounds pretty good. But the big problem with 40B itself is that there's today, as far as I know, there's not any US ethanol that's being converted into sustainable aviation fuel. Therefore, there's not any of us that are producing some of this climate smart ag corn. There's none of us really have a market to get our CSA corn to an ethanol plant and therefore into SAF. So, and I believe that for 20, 60 cents a bushel split up amongst all the different players, I just don't know that the juice is going to be worth the squeeze. That's though utilizing this bundle approach of bundling cover crop, no-till, and enhanced efficiency fertilizer, and only allocating 10 CI points. In reality, with the GREET model, doing those practices for most counties would lower your CI score by closer to 30 points, which is like what it's done on my farm. We're 33 points lower than the county default. So say that instead of giving 10 points, it's 30 points. We triple these numbers. Now I think we can make some headway and get more farmers to participate, get more farmers brought into this soil health space. So hopefully that made sense. Last week, I multiplied the 35 cents times 1.7, which was the wrong math. You got to take the 35-cent SAF tax credit divided by 1.7 gallons of ethanol per gallon of SAF, and run the math from there. So let me see. Josh, how likely is it that the ILEC is going to stay low in the updated GREET for 45Z? It's hard to tell. Hopefully they keep it low. They adjusted it a little bit with this update of the GREET model, the 40B SAF GREET model. They adjusted indirect land use change just a little bit. Hopefully they don't screw it up further. But I know there's a constant just battle going back and forth. I've been talking with my in at Environmental Defense Fund quite a bit here recently, and I know it's a daily battle back and forth. But hard to tell what they're going to do to change it. So anyway, all right, let's keep moving on. But the point being is, here's the actual simplified version of the math for 40B. Also, this is the math for sustainable aviation fuel with 45Z. They get $1.75. And actually with 40B, there might be a little bit more because there's a cliff payment, meaning that if you qualify for 40B, you start with a tax credit of $1.25 per gallon of sustainable aviation fuel. Then you earn additional points for the CI reduction. So technically with 40B, it could be a little bit higher than this, but I don't want to spend even more time than what we already have. The point being is 62 cents or so, kind of best case scenario here per bushel under 40B. And so if they use this bundle approach, I don't think it's going to be that incredible. One last real quick thing on this. So for sustainable aviation fuel, the 45Z tax credit max out at $1.75 per gallon. Therefore, every point is worth 3.5 cents. Therefore, the math that I've laid out here. In 45Z, ethanol, biodiesel, and renewable diesel is worth up to 2 cents per CI point. So 2 cents for ethanol, 3.5 cents for SAF. Okay, so if they take this bundle approach, therefore the couple point, if you were to get 10 points of reduction rather than the actual CI score, if they go with this bundle approach for 45Z, which hopefully they do not, but say they go with the bundle approach and not the actual GREET score, if they only give 10 points for these three practices, 10 points in 45Z for ethanol is worth 2 cents per point, therefore 20 cents a bushel, therefore, not great. The math is basically the same, 20 cents a 20 cents a gallon of ethanol produced, 20 cents times 3 gallons per bushel, like what I laid out here. And therefore, for ethanol, it could be this 60-cent value as well if they go with this bundle approach. Again, I don't think that's going to really move the needle, but it's something. So for farmers that are doing these practices, a lot of farmers that you guys are on here that you're doing these practices, it could still definitely be worth it, but we will see what ends up happening. So Pierre, is there no mandated split for the farmer? Who determines the farmer's payout? The ethanol producer? Yeah, there's no mandated split. I don't think there's going to be a mandated split, but I don't know. I mean, hard to speculate on that. So the only way that I see there being an equitable share is if there's transparency, right? That's what this boils down to. So farmer, you need to know what the math actually is. You need to understand the value that you're creating. And then let's collaborate, right? Let's collaborate and let's go after some of this money together. There's tens of millions of dollars, billions of dollars to be had in these credits, tens of millions at a local level, billions of dollars at the nationwide level. There's opportunity there, but we need to have some of these rules get sorted out the right way. And then we need to have transparency and equitable share between the farmers and the biofuel producers. So we will see what ends up happening. But anyway, let's keep moving on. Hopefully that cleared things up. Point being, they punted on the actual GREET model score, the actual feedstock calculator. They went with the bundle approach. It's worth around 60 cents a gallon, 60 cents a bushel. If they use the same thing for 45Z, all three of these practices combined together would only be worth 60 cents a bushel, when in reality, they move the GREET score significantly and therefore could help to decarbonize these fuels even further, create more economic opportunity. So hopefully they end up going with the actual GREET feedstock calculator for 45Z rather than just this bundle approach. But we need to be ready for either one. We got great indication as to the definitions of these practices, which I'll review here real quick. We got great definitions here of the practices, and then we got some great clarity as to the rigor that's going to be needed to verify that these practices are legit. So everything that we've been building out with CI certification and the verification protocols we've been building with our third-party verifier, it was spot on and really moving forward. So you got to document your practices. It's going to have to be verified by these approved verifiers, which is the one that we work with, and we go from there. So Bob, yeah, your local ethanol plant won't participate because their ethanol goes to California. So you're saying they won't participate in the alcohol to jet and the sustainable aviation fuel thing, I think is what you're getting at. It says their fuel needs to go to Canada. Why the difference in fuel market? So Bob, I think, there's a premium market for low carbon fuels in Canada and in California, in Oregon, and in Washington, and there's other states that are adding themselves to the mix. So probably what they're getting at is there's already existing markets for those state LCFS markets, a low carbon fuel standard market. So they can get a premium in those markets. Today, there's only LanzaJet that's producing sustainable aviation fuel with ethanol, and they're a 10 million gallon plant down in Georgia. And today they're bringing in Brazilian ethanol. They're not even using US ethanol in that plant right now. So probably what they're getting at is the alcohol to jet sustainable aviation fuel market. It's basically doesn't exist right now, right? It's very, very early. over time, it's supposed to be huge, right? So that facility is 10 million gallons. The target market is 30 billion gallons by 2050. So, I mean, huge market opportunity there. If we're producing 30 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel, and if you had to have 1.7 gallons of ethanol per gallon of sustainable aviation fuel, that would take what, like almost 50 million or 50 billion gallons of ethanol to convert to 50 billion gallons of ethanol to 30 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel. Total in the US today, we only produce like 16 billion gallons of ethanol. So 16 billion gallons of ethanol today. And if we were to do 100% of this SAF market with ethanol, it'd take 50 billion gallons. Plus, we still got to put ethanol in our tanks going down the road. Like, it's going to take more than just ethanol, but we can take a big chunk. But his point probably being, he's got to focus on the low carbon fuel markets that are already existing today. I would do the same thing, unless they can really tag team with a SAF producer, and find some split and some market opportunity there. But it's just such a small market today that they're probably going to stick with their market. So, but they can utilize a LCFS market and participate in 45Z. So, and that's been my push here the whole time is 40B. It's not really going to move the needle. There's some producers in California and some other places that are doing some of these fuels, but at least for like the ethanol to jet fuel deal for 40B, it's done at the end of this year. It's such a small thing. Like, we can't really focus on that. We've got to focus on 45Z, which means on the farm, we need to be prepared if we have to do these 3 check the box practices. We need to be ready for that. Maybe that's what they're going to do. We also need to be ready if they do the score approach. And the good thing is, with our approach of helping you to document all these practices, we're getting you ready for either option. And talking with our verifier that we're going to be ready for either one. So, okay, let me go through really fast those definitions. So cover crop, you've got to utilize like your local NRCS guidelines, but cover crop, it was pretty broad. You can companion crop, you can interseed, you can hay, you can graze. You cannot harvest it. So my beloved relay crop, I can't do. That'd be on my soybeans and stuff anyway. Probably not a huge deal on my side. But anyway, so cover crop, pretty open. No-till. No-till doesn't just mean no-till in these rules. No-till also means strip till is okay. You can disturb the area directly where you are going to plant the crop. So basically the furrow, right? So you can disturb the furrow and still qualify as no-till, but really they should call it minimal till, no-till, strip till. But they simplified the wording to just call it no-till. But there is a little bit more flexibility. Chat with your Continuum Ag rep, and we can figure out exactly making sure that you would qualify. The third component is the enhanced efficiency fertilizers, which basically means nutrient stabilizers. You have to use approved nutrient stabilizers on at least 50% of your nitrogen, and you have to have a written plan to manage your phosphorus and your potassium and your nitrogen. So this is probably going to be the main change, that we've got to be documenting additional details when it comes to our fertility management. And we are putting together the actual university lists of these approved enhanced efficiency fertilizer products. But we're talking nutrient stabilizers, right? So the actual urease inhibitors, nitrification inhibitors. They also specifically noted ammonium thiosol, ATS. So that's good. We're looking into humics and those kind of things. There's been a ton of questions come in about all that. Point being is that enhanced efficiency fertilizer thing, plan on figuring out how to utilize a nutrient stabilizer. Be careful of the ones that you pick, because a lot of these nutrient stabilizers, their mode of action is that they basically kill the microbes that do the conversions of the nutrients. So they kill those microbes in order to stop the conversions from happening and thus stabilize the nitrogen. Well, it directly is hurting soil health. And for those of you that have followed us for a long time, you know that our real reason for doing all this stuff is help farmers improve soil health and improve their profitability. So choose the right stabilizers that don't end up doing just as much harm to your soil as good that they could end up doing for the water quality side of things and for the emissions reduction side of things. So anyway, cover crop, no-till, and those stabilizers, more to come. Jeff, can you market your CI corn score separate from where your corn physically goes? Jeff, that's kind of the billion-dollar question. And basically what they laid out in the rules is that they said you've got to be aggregating these bushels on a mass balance approach. If your corn and my corn were both being stored at the same facility, but we are separate entities, right, which we are, we could keep our grain separate and mass balance where you have your grain, I have my grain. We each have our own certificates. We each have our own allotment of bushels. They happen to be stored at the same place, but we still own our certificates separately. Then you can sell your corn. I can sell my corn. We can sell our certificates, our own paths. Therefore, opens up a little bit of some gray area here for the ability to move around these bushels and these certificates kind of separately, that it can't be exact one-to-one traceability. But overall, plan on that you still have to take your grain and deliver your grain and deliver their certificate with it. I don't believe that I'm going to be able to sell my certificate to a ethanol producer in Minnesota without sending my grain to Minnesota, right? I think the way that I interpreted the rules is that my grain and my certificates still have to follow each other through the supply chain, but you could basically have a batch where, okay, we've got X number of low carbon bushels. We're going to pull those low carbon bushels out today, and that's going to go to the ethanol plant. These other bushels that don't have a CI score or aren't verified as climate smart, those ones could get pulled out and go to the hog producer, right? That can't get a tax credit today. So originally I thought maybe you'd have to blend it all together. The high carbon corn and the low carbon corn, now they're commingled. Now we're in the middle, right? A weighted average score. But what was laid out is that there is a pathway here for keeping those bushels separate. And that does open up some pretty critical opportunities here for not having to just blend all these bushels together and therefore just kind of water everything down. There is some opportunity to keep things separate, but a lot more to come on that market opportunity. It's got me really excited. So I'll follow up. Let's keep in touch on that. I think we're gonna we got some things going on there. Josh, I missed the stabilizer talk, but how do we know more about whether 45Z will only take into account the synthetic stabilizers, or will they recognize natural stabilizers too, like 590A already does? We need to take a look at that, Josh. So the universities have a list of these approved, like enhanced efficiency fertilizer additives. So I've got one of my guys that is doing the research to put those lists together from the different universities. I anticipate that we'll get that put in our topsoil tool somewhere, right? So you can kind of choose when you select a fertilizer in topsoil, you select your fertilizer, the date you applied it, the fertilizer product, the rate, and you can select the stabilizer that you utilize there. We'll have the lists and stuff there and probably published somewhere else as well, but more to come on that on the list. If anyone has found those lists or doing research with your own local university, would love to collaborate with you on it and cross compare notes from what we're seeing on different universities and make sure that we're all crossing our T's and dotting our I's on choosing the right stabilizers. Hopefully they make it fairly open, that there is a lot of new products coming to this space, but hard to tell at this point. But anyway, okay. I've rambled way too long already. We got a gazillion questions I still want to get to. If you got some in the chat, I'll get to yours as well, but a variety of questions that have come in. So Andrew is asking, if I sign up with a company about good CI, about GREET CI stuff, who is on the driver's seat as far as management goes and the data? So in our system, the farmer is in the driver's seat with their data. The farmer owns their data. You get to control who it's shared with. And even at the end of the year, the farmer will sign basically an attestation, just like IRS laid out last week. You're going to have to sign an attestation. It's going to have to, basically, you're the one liable for it. It's your data, it's your grain, it's your story. You're ultimately going to be the one liable for that. So there'll be an attestation. and there'll be a data release that you want to opt in to our third-party verification. But ultimately in our system, Andrew, the farmer's in the driver's seat, managing and controlling their data. And we want to just help you to get your data verified and get it to whatever buyer is going to pay you the most for it. So that's what we're after. So, Justin, Dad's been out of cover crops for 5+ years now. Son's on year 2 of farming. Son's looking into a no-till drill and roller crimper since Dad sold the equipment. Just want to see whether or not the CI score will help to justify the purchase to back in the cover crop game. Justin, hopefully you got some of the stuff there from early on. If they go with this bundle approach, the total value is maybe around 60 cents or so per bushel, with the farmer getting a percentage of that. And we don't know what that percent's going to be. Like I mentioned before, maybe somewhere around 20, 30, 40, 50%. Like, I don't know if it's going to be any better than that. There's some pilot projects going on today, paying a farmer as little as 2 cents per bushel for the data. And there's some ethanol plants that have said that they're planning on covering their cost and giving the farmer 100% of the rest of the value of the tax credit. So, but happy to run your numbers and stuff. Go to topsoil.ag. You can get your CI score, and we show you the value of your score on topsoil. And we can walk through and figure out, is it going to justify to get in the cover crop game like you guys have been out of now? I think it will be, especially if they use the actual CI score rather than the bundle approach. It'll absolutely be very much worth it. And that's why I'm so excited about it. And I think a lot of farmers can convert to doing these practices if they use the actual score. It plays to farmer mentality of, now there's a new scoreboard with a transparent point system, and you get paid for scoring points. That's why I've liked this thing the whole time, versus what they punted to, which is just, no, 3 practices. We're going to pay you a flat amount if you do these 3 practices. Like, we already have that. It's called cost share. So hopefully they go back to the actual scoreboard approach, but we'll see. Jeremy, when will farmers actually be able to get paid for this? I mean, that's a billion-dollar question there too, right? So, but essentially how I think about this for 40B, I don't think there's going to be any farmer get paid. If you are navigating that, would love to chat, but I don't know that there's going to be a path in 40B. In 45Z, it starts on January 1st, and it's for fuel produced starting on January 1st. In order to produce low carbon fuel on January 1st, you gotta have low carbon grain on hand on December 31st. In order to have low carbon grain on hand on December 31st, you gotta be buying and storing that grain and having it ready to rock and roll, which means you're gonna have to buy that grain in Q4 of 2024. I'm sure they're not going to pay you the full amount for the data. It's going to be a 2-tranche payment system. Pay you an estimate upon delivery, pay you a settle-up payment once the verification has been finalized, which is going to take into 2025. We know that now with our verifier. More details come on that later, but we know that we're going to be into 2025 before the CI scores are 100% verified. Again, therefore, likely a little bit of money starting to flow later this year. Again, pending getting the actual 45Z rules. Who knows when that's going to happen? But starting to flow a little bit of money, but ramping up once we get more rules, once we get more data verified throughout 2025 and then the years after that. So, Doug, how do you find out if your land is eligible for payments on carbon? So with these tax credits, Doug, we're talking about where your grain is going and the supply chain that your grain is going into. If your grain is going to a biofuel market, if you're producing low carbon grain that can be utilized to produce low carbon biofuel and garner these tax credits. So if you're selling into a biofuel vertical, you likely would be able to help your ethanol plant or your biofuel producer. You can help them to decarbonize, help them to create these tax credits, and they can utilize your farming practices to help them to lower their CI score. It's about collaboration. It's about combining together those low carbon crop farmers with low carbon biofuel producers. Let's tag team together. You can make some of the money on it. If you're not selling into a biofuel company, there's a lot of other programs out there, a lot of other things in development. And we already proved some of that last year with carbon inset projects. You cannot stack a carbon credit program and a CI program. The IRS was very clear on that. You cannot stack the two. So if you're selling into a biofuel space, I suggest you don't sign up for a carbon credit program. Wait and figure out what's going to happen with these CI programs. If you're not selling into biofuel, there's a variety of different carbon credit programs out there. Happy to have a conversation. So, Stephen, if you have fields with different CI scores, you have to store them separately. So, Stephen, you definitely will have, every field will have its own CI score, right? Every field will have a slightly different yield, and yield is part of the score. Every field will have slightly different management, right? Maybe a little bit different fertilizer program, a little bit different pesticide program. Maybe that one field didn't get the cover crop on it because it was wet in the fall and didn't get done, or whatever it may be. Every field will have a slightly different score. I believe that if we go the score route, if the IRS goes the score route, when you are managing your bushels and aggregating your bushels together, you'll probably end up with a weighted average CI score. Or you'll be able to have, call it 10,000 bushels from field, the West 40, and the West 40's got 10,000 bushels that come off of it with a score of 5. And you got the home 80 that's got 20,000 bushels that come off of it with a score of -5. They go to the same bin, but in that bin, you have 10,000 certificates with a score of +5, 20,000 certificates with a score of -5. You might be able to sell them separately, right? So they're going to the same ethanol plant, but today's loads have a score of +5. Tomorrow, we're selling the certificates that have a score of -5. Might be able to keep those separate based on the new IRS guidance. What I'd been planning on, what I've mostly been talking about, is you have 10,000 bushels with a +5, 20,000 bushels with a -5. You blend them together. Now we have 30,000 bushels with what, like a -1 or whatever the weighted average of that would be. So either option I think is okay. Keep the bushels separate, sell their certificates separate, allocate the certificates to loads. Obviously, you're not going to actually know which corn came from which field, but you'll have the certificates associated to your grain site. But I would also plan on that they're going to blend all these bushels together, and you'll have a weighted average score representing all those bushels. So hopefully that made sense. Happy to walk through that some more. Pretty complicated stuff. Troy, what ethanol plants in Iowa have committed to passing tax credits on to growers? There's very few that are really pushing out stuff. A variety of them talking. You can see on our website a deal that we announced here recently with Siouxland Energy. We've got another one that been pushing on these guys. Hopefully we'll get pushed out here this week. Another group. We got some verbal commitments here recently, and there's gonna be a variety of projects that we're involved in that are quiet, right? That we won't be able to publicly disclose because they're doing it small and keeping it quiet and starting pilot projects on a small scale. But talk with your local ethanol plant, ask them what they are doing. Now don't go to them and say, hey, how much are you paying for low CI corn and how much are you passing along to the farmers for 45Z? Don't do that. That's going to torque them off and make them mad. And then they're going to call me and be mad at me. And I've got plenty of those calls. But instead, go to them and say, hey, these tax credits could be a big deal. And I think I can help you because I've got low carbon grain. I'm doing some of these practices. Let's collaborate together. And hey, I'm working with these Continuum guys. They're helping me to get my data organized. They're helping me to get verified. And they'll help to get the data pushed to whatever software you guys are going to use at the ethanol plant. So let's collaborate. And from there, let's go get the neighbors involved and let's go get some other folks. We need volume of low carbon bushels because it is going to be a volume play that a lot of these ethanol plants are buying tens of millions of bushels of corn every year. If they only have a small amount of low carbon corn, it doesn't move the weighted average and make these credits really worth it. So we need volume. And that's why we launched the billion bushel challenge. We're already well over a quarter of the way to hitting our billion bushel goal, which would be nearly 20% of the ethanol market. And we're at, last I saw the other day, we're at 276 million bushels, something like that. So really amazing. And 270 some million bushels with an average CI score of 10.8. So really, really awesome stuff. But we need to keep talking with our friends in the biofuel space and collaborate together. All right, last couple on this other deal here. From Sam, I understand that strip till counts as no-till does a 6-inch shank count. It doesn't specify. It just says you can disturb the furrow, but that's it. You can't do full width tillage. You can't disturb the rest of the soil. You've got to keep the residue evenly dispersed, but you can remove the residue from directly in the furrow. That's what we know right now. Do we know of any biofuel companies that plan to participate in 40B at this time? I don't know of any. Do we know Valero is going to participate? No, not sure. For 40B, I doubt it. I think the sites need to still remain on 45Z, which is the crop that we're planting right now. It's going to be subject to 45Z anyway. So I think that's going to be the focus. So it's 40B worth considering for a farmer in 2024. They know that they will meet the cover crop, tillage, and fertilizer requirements. So if you believe that you would qualify as a climate smart farmer because you're doing cover crop, no-till, and using nutrient stabilizers, send me a note. I've got a database put together of the farmers that we believe will qualify. And if we think that there's going to be some money for you to be made, now we've got you on our list and we'll let you know. Okay, so if you believe that you would qualify, talk to your Continuum Ag rep or send me a note. We'll make sure that you get added to our list. I don't think any farmers are going to make any money in 40B, but doesn't hurt to at least kind of be in line and be ready. But don't spend the money now is what I'm saying. So I think that's the list there. Okay. I've got a whole bunch of other questions that came in from the webinar the other day. Hopefully you guys have seen the webinar the other day. A bunch of people have been coming into this off and on. Great to see so many of you here this morning. Happy Tuesday. Just to recap real quick, we're talking the 40B tax credits, which is sustainable aviation fuel only. We're also talking 45Z. 40B is really an indicator for 45Z. We need to be ready with our field level CI scores in the GREET model, which is what we've been running in TopSoil. You can go to topsoil.ag and get your score. And for $5 an acre, we'll help you get verified. Very clearly laid out in the guidance that that's going to be required. So get ready for it now. Hopefully it's the actual score. If not the actual score, okay, maybe there will be this Climate Smart Ag bundle approach. If you are doing these practices, make sure that we are helping you to get things documented. Because if they do the bundle approach, we need to be ready for that too. Hopefully they use the score, not the bundle and the check the box on the practices, but hard to tell yet. Bob, if my ethanol plant can't participate in the SAF market, that will allow low carbon corn add more value to the will the low carbon corn add more value to the California fuel market? No, not today, Bob. So there's not a pathway. So in these LCFS markets, they call them pathways, right? So in order to qualify and in order to get value for your carbon reduction in the California market, you've got to have that fuel going through a verified pathway. Currently, at least to my knowledge, there's not a verified and approved pathway for utilizing low carbon corn as a method for producing low carbon ethanol. Now, hopefully 45Z sets the precedent that this can be a thing. And I believe in the future it will. I believe that in the future they will open up the opportunity to utilize the on-farm practices towards the low carbon fuel market. But today there's not that path. So essentially your ethanol producer, they can get their premium selling into California based on the practices that they're doing at their facility, right? Their scope 1 reducing practices and their scope 2, which is direct emissions and the emissions from the energy. So they can utilize those reductions towards California. They can use those reductions and the on-farm reductions towards 45Z. But the on-farm piece is only for these 45Z markets. It's really the first time that the on-farm practices are being counted towards these sustainability goals, which is the overall big win. Okay, last week was a big win for ag, big win for biofuels. We got some clarity. The first time that the GREET model is being utilized for tax credits, and it's the first time that the farmers and the on-farm practices are being recognized towards some of these carbon reduction climate goals. So some big wins there, but no. So the California market, your practices won't do anything, at least right now. I believe in the future they will, but in the short term, no. All right, I got a massive list of questions here. So Vance, from these are the questions from the webinar the other day that I wasn't able to get to because there was 80, 90 questions that came in. Do products like, so this is from Vance, do products like Nvidia and Proven 40 qualify for enhanced efficiency fertilizers? I don't think they will. The enhanced efficiency fertilizer are nutrient stabilizers. Those products are biologicals that would basically just replace the fertilizer that would therefore be stabilized. But I don't believe they're going to qualify. But again, we need to look at the university list. Stephen, when do we start the verification process with individual farmers? We're cranking on it right now. We're building, so you can go to topsoil.ag, get your CI score. We'll help you start the verification process right now. We have already been doing this all across the country, so already doing this. But what we are still building is additional software tools, right? We keep building like crazy, some really cool software stuff to make it simple to document the actual farming practices. So there's a couple new tools that are in our beta system right now, due to be released probably around our field day, our Topsoil Summit, which is June 3rd. So we're a month away. So then we'll really be able to crank up the process on the actual documentation, but you can get started, get connected with one of our agronomists at topsoil.ag right now. So and we definitely recommend, like, that's going to be the key, is get your data organized. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do here. Get your data organized. Maybe it's going to be the score in 45Z. We're going to be ready. Maybe it's going to be this climate smart bundle approach. Well, we're going to be ready. Maybe it's going to be a different carbon inset program, right? Maybe these biofuel things fall apart. Well, we got to be ready. And it all takes data. So that's really what all this boils down to. And the government really laid that out for us. They gave us the definitions. They gave us the clarity on how to get it verified. And it's great because it's what we've been doing for 18 gosh darn months that I've been pushing this. Should I be thinking about storage in my 2024 crop in anticipation of 45Z? Probably. So be thinking about storing your crop. But this is from John, question from the other day. So John, I think you're going to want to either store your crop or talk to your elevator about them storing it for you. So what was really interesting is that the IRS said if your grain is being stored commingled with other entities, basically other taxpayers, right? That as long as you have an agreement with the off-taker, they were talking about sustainable aviation fuel off-taker, but say with your ethanol plant, you could say, ethanol plant, I'm going to sell you low carbon corn, but I'm going to store it at the elevator. And it sounds like as long as it still has you still own it, then you're going to be able to sell that low carbon corn with your score or with your certificates associated to it. You can then sell that to the ethanol plant, and instead of having it all commingled with everyone else's grain, which is a big win. But not every elevator is going to allow you to store grain in their site and you still own it, right? Usually they buy it from you, they own it, they are then going to commingle, and then they are then going to go and sell it. But there is technically now a pathway for keeping your grain and just storing it in somebody else's bin site. So Thad, this is only for 40B. When are we expecting to hear updates on 45Z? We don't know yet. So all the updates that came out last week from the IRS were only 40B. They didn't even mention 45Z. And all we can do is, it's speculation, but we need to be prepared that they release the rules on 40B. If they use the same type of rules for 45Z, we need to be ready, which means the bundle approach. Check the box on the practices. But hopefully, and the indicators are still that they will use the actual score. We need to be ready for that too. So, but we know now it's going to take a lot of data. We got definitions around the practices, and it's going to take documentation. So get going on it here now. So Roger, International Sustainability and Carbon ISCC. What do you know about the above ISCC? So ISCC is the European low carbon market. So Bob has been talking in the chat about the California LCFS market. The European market is called ISCC. So ISCC does have a pathway for utilizing the low carbon grain, and that's like what ADM has been doing, right? So ADM has a program that they rolled out a couple years ago where they are paying farmers 2 cents a bushel up to I believe 4 to 6 cents a bushel for corn. You go to the platform of the company that they are working with, and you fill out a profile. And they pay you 2 to 6 cents a bushel for giving them the data, and they are monetizing that via the ISCC European market. So we are working with our verifier that if a farmer is selling to an ethanol plant that does want to participate in ISCC, we do have the pathway open to get you verified that you do qualify for the ISCC market. So same type of an approach here, keeping your data organized, and there might be some opportunity to get a premium in the European market, which would be stackable with the production tax credit of 45Z. So very, very good, good point there, Roger. And we're ready for both. It all takes data. That's what it boils down to. Whether we verify for ISCC or not, that's really going to depend on the buyer of your bushels. And we just need to ask them what's the market and what would they be willing to pay as an extra premium if you're already verified for ISCC. So we can have that conversation when the time is right, but ask your ethanol plant if they are participating in ISCC, and we can go from there. So, okay, I have not done a good job of getting through all these questions. Can you resend the documents you're referring to in the chat? Get the meeting. Oh, sorry. This was anonymous attendee. Anonymous attendee. We don't know who you were. But if you missed the rules, you can just go on to Google, and you can Google these 40B SAF rules and the IRS guidelines. It's like a 40-page document. It's actually not that bad of a read. Of course, there's plenty of stuff that's confusing. It's government, but you can download that. You can go and read the actual language. Google those 40B rules and you can find them. What are the chances that 45Z follows a similar check the box approach to the feedstock verification from Jordan? We've really hit on that here. We don't know yet, but we need to be ready for the check the box, and we need to be ready for the actual score. Brian, do you anticipate any correction to the oversight regarding the use of manure, either 40B or 45Z? Brian, yes, great question. Again, this was from the webinar the other day. So in the 40B rules, they don't even mention manure. They only talk about enhanced efficiency fertilizers, stabilizing your synthetic fertilizer. Now, they don't really spell out any fertilizers or any manures. So it's in the gray area right now as far as if you're stabilizing your manure and that is your fertilizer, would that qualify? I would think maybe, but I don't really know. So we really need clarity on the manure component for 45Z. And again, that's why we really need to use the actual feedstock calculator, which does a nice job of detailing out the manure management components. You choose the actual species, the rates, a travel distance. There's a lot of good components in there about manure management. So again, hopefully they utilize the actual feedstock calculator for 45Z, but there's a lot of gray area in regards to manure when it comes to 40B. But nonetheless, I plan on utilizing some kind of a stabilizer for your manure and for your synthetic fertilizer. John, residue removal question: is baling corn stalks followed by planting cover crops okay? That I don't think none of that was laid out. So what they did note is you cannot burn your residue, but they did not give any rules or any indication about baling your corn stalks. So I think it'd be okay, but John, we'll have to keep in touch on that and figure out what's the verifier saying. And again, hopefully we get some more rules before this fall when it'd be time to bale the corn stalks. But at this point, no rules. So kind of a toss-up. Anonymous attendee asks, do you interpret the rule against participating in other GHG reduction or carbon programs as prohibiting a farmer from being enrolled in them in general if they want to participate in a renewable fuel market, or just that you can't sell into both in the same crop year? I think so the IRS ruled that you cannot have your low carbon crop go into these low carbon biofuel tax credit markets. You can't have your low carbon crop go to the biofuel market and participate in a carbon market, an offset or an inset. They noted any greenhouse gas outcome based program, right? So I've been saying this for a long time that I don't think you're going to be able to do both CI and a carbon credit program. And the IRS, I didn't know if the IRS was going to explicitly say you can't do both, but they very clearly said you can't do both. And part of the farmer attestation that each of us are going to have to do at the end of the year, part of the attestation is going to have to be that you're attesting that you're not participating in any carbon credit or outcome-based program. And part of the rules that was laid out with the IRS last week is that fraud in these credits would be subject to fines, potential jail time, and covering the fees, court fees and stuff. So we don't want to take our chances here. Bless me. Very clearly stated though, you can't stack. Can't be in a CI program and carbon credit program. Not gonna be worth the risk. So what I am looking at though is the CI program is only for your acres that are actually producing the corn or soybean going into these fuels. So what about other edge of field stuff or in the years where you aren't selling into these markets, right? There's a variety of different carbon inset programs and those kind of things that are 1 year, that are a lot more flexible. So I think there's a lot of opportunity still out there, but definitely cannot be locked into any type of long-term contracts, which I've been yelling about since 2019 when I got involved in the carbon market space. Don't like long-term contracts are a bad idea. And now we know we can't stack. So all right, let's crank through a couple more here. I do have till the top of the hour, so I'll hang out with you guys. Anyone that's got a drop, appreciate you hanging out. We still got quite a few of you on here, so I'll keep answering questions. Brian asks, where do you market your grain? What end users honor this program? So I don't know if you ask where I market my grain, but typically today my corn goes to feed pigs. I'm in Washington County, Iowa. We've got hog barns on just about every corner. So most of my corn today goes to feed pigs. So I'm very interested in the questions that was brought up before about the decoupling of the certificates and the actual grain and some of the traceability stuff. But overall with these credit programs, the tax credit goes to the biofuel producer. So it's not a blender's credit. It's not a credit for at the pump. It's a biofuel producer tax credit. So therefore, if you want to utilize your low carbon crop as part of the solution here and potential to tap into some of these dollars in partnership with your biofuel producer, the end user of your grain's got to be biofuel. So good question, Brian. Do you have to qualify for 40B first in order to qualify for 45Z, or expecting them to act independently? Totally independent. So 40B is a 2023 and 2024 tax credit for sustainable aviation fuel. 45Z is a 2025, 26, and 27 tax credit for ethanol, renewable diesel, biodiesel, sustainable aviation fuel, any clean biofuel, transportation biofuel is the key thing. So any transportation biofuel. So totally independent, and they don't overlap or anything. Kevin, do you see anything coming for the manure guys since it's not a synthetic? Or do you think we'll need to use a type of stabilizer? I kind of addressed that before. They did not even mention manure. I would anticipate though, if you're using manure, plan on using the stabilizer. Or some kind of a pit additive, some type of a tool that's going to qualify as a enhanced efficiency additive. And I'm sure those products are listed in these university databases. We'll follow back up on that and try to get some info out as soon as we know more. But Tony, if only putting a mix of 14% ATS into our liquid 32%, does that qualify as a stabilizer for your total nitrogen units? Great question. So what Tony's doing is 14% ammonium thiosol blended with, if it was all the rest would be 32%, call it 86%, 32%. I would think that it would qualify, but it's going to just take the university specifications, I suppose, as to how much is required. But in the actual IRS rules, there's no specifics as to how much of the stabilizer you have to utilize, but I'm sure it's going to be based on the actual labeled rates or for these stabilizers or your university guidelines. But Tony, we can definitely look into that some more. Definitely talk with your Continuum Ag rep, and we'll have to do a little digging into that one with you. But Larry, how about manure? So we've gone through a couple times here now, but nothing on manure. I think you mentioned it. Was there any mention of manure from Levi? Nope. Nick, will this be based on a whole farm system or field by field? All acres must be no-till. Corn on corn acres specifically. What about removing corn stalks for stock bales? So no mention of removing stalks for bales. You just can't burn them. But this would be field by field. So what it said is that in order for your field to qualify, the whole field has to have all three of the practices in order for the field to qualify as climate smart. So the field has to have cover crop, no-till, and use nutrient stabilizers across the whole field. Now, what's a field? I think that's going to obviously end up being up for some interpretation. But if you have one field that would be climate smart, this other field didn't get cover crop applied, therefore it's not going to qualify as climate smart. Maybe it's still, hopefully it's going to end up with its own CI score, but that field is going to have a higher score than the field with the cover crop. That's going to have a lower carbon footprint, a lower score, and they will be able to be verified separately. We document and verify field by field, which is absolutely the right thing, and that was solidified with the IRS guidelines the other day. So think of them as separate fields, and we help you to document and get verified as separate fields. Anonymous attendee asks, will there be a link sent with a recording? Yep, it's all on our YouTube page. So any of you that missed, you can go to YouTube, go to our Continuum Ag YouTube page, and you can see the recording from the other day. Andrew, this bundling seems pretty restrictive on eligible practices. If we wanted to expand the list of eligible practices, maybe to better align with USDA Climate Smart Practice list, is there anything that cross-reference those practices with the GREET model that you know of? I would love to expand the list from only those three things. I think it's a great idea. And Andrew, I guess we gotta go convince the right people at the IRS and that we need to use more than just three practices. Hopefully they end up using the actual GREET feedstock calculator. In the GREET model, they know all kinds of different practices and a lot more details, a lot more flexible. So hopefully they use the actual GREET model. But today we need to be ready for either the check the box on the practices or the score. Diana, thanks. She put in the chat here. TopSoil Summit, June 3rd. We've already got a couple hundred people registered, but there are still a couple of spots, or there's still some room, but we do anticipate that we're going to get this thing really full. We've talked a lot about sustainable aviation fuel in this talk here today. At the TopSoil Summit, we have a rep coming from Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines coming to our farmer event specifically to talk about this sustainable aviation fuel thing. So that's going to be amazing. We've got a farmer panel. We've got our verifiers going to be there. The CPA firms are going to be there. Tax credit broker is going to be there speaking. All these people, speaking. I'm going to give a more thorough talk. And we're working through a variety of other folks as well. Different government folks going to be there. Other industry representatives and stuff. So more and more getting pushed out. But yeah, be sure to get registered. All right, a couple more questions here. Eddie, if you aren't near a SAF plant and you qualify, can you arbitrage your certificate with another producer's corn that is near the SAF plant? We don't know yet. What the IRS laid out though is that your certificate and the tracking of the grain likely end up going together. So the grain and all that go together. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Dad in there on the stover. Yeah. So he's looking at the rules. The stover residue removal is not specific, but you have to keep the soil covered. So what he's getting at is, okay, these questions about baling your corn stalks, you just want to leave enough cover out there that there's still cover and residue on the surface. Just don't bale everything off. But Brandon, is there a requirement laid out for the cover crop to qualify rate species? Yeah, they said that. So there was nothing specific. Instead, what they said is utilize your local NRCS guidelines. Your Continuum Ag rep will have all of those. So there's localized guidelines about rates and species and dates and stuff like that we are going to have to do. We anticipated that that we're going to have to follow NRCS guidelines on the cover crop. Should we store our grain until after the first of the year? From anonymous attendee. Plan on being able to at least store your grain or have some kind of a traceability system to it. But you likely will be able to store it in somebody else's grain site. But I do think that there will probably be some dollars be moved around late part of this year. Travis, any idea on the CI point reduction if manure fertilizer or digestate fertilizer is used versus synthetic? Not clear on the value of using organic fertilizer versus EEF. So if 45Z happens the way that we want, which is with the actual scores, utilizing manure instead of synthetic fertilizer, in a lot of counties reduces your CI score by like 12 points. Some places even more. Like utilizing manure is a huge opportunity to lower your CI score. Hopefully they use the actual GREET feedstock calculator when it comes to 45Z. Again, I would plan on using a stabilizer with it, but we don't know 100% yet. So does it look better to store corn this fall versus soybeans? From anonymous, yeah. I mean, the opportunity and the money is definitely better on corn versus soybeans. So yeah, if you're going to store anything, it'd be store the corn. Join late. Yeah, webinar will be posted. Are there certifications verified as per bushel, per field, per grower? And when will these be made? So great. Are there certificates? Okay, so ask about their certificates. The certificates, we're going to basically allocate them per field, right? So each field will have practices, we'll have a score. Each field will have an amount of bushels that come off it. Therefore, we'll get a batch of certificates. So the IRS called them a batch in the guidelines. So each field will get a batch of certificates, and then those certificates and the grain get blended and stuff from there. But then for each grower, you will then have a batch of certificates per grower, meaning per entity, right? Whatever your taxable entity is. But we start with a per field. Really good question. And that's what we're doing right now with our verification program. Melissa, I understand all entities taking physical possession of the feedstock are required to comply with CORSIA. What are the traceability requirements of CORSIA? Will the government determine who the third-party verifiers are? I don't know exactly what the traceability stuff of CORSIA is. They laid out some of the guidelines on the mass balance and some of all that. Looks like it's going to be okay, but the rules were not very clear in my mind. So working through a lot of that traceability stuff. Will the government determine who the third-party verifiers are? There's already a bunch of verifiers out there in the CARB space. So what was laid out in the rules is that if you're participating in the California Air Resources Board verification CARB that and utilizing the specific ISO standard, that then you would qualify, and which our third-party verifier does. So we're sitting great on that. From AS, are you talking about the Alliance to Advance Climate Smart Ag pilot project? The aerial restriction was for the program. I don't know what that is. So I don't think that's what we're talking about. Anonymous attendee, how will this affect how small elevators buy and sell grain? I think it's going to massively impact elevators. That they're going to have the opportunity to help to aggregate these low carbon bushels or aggregate these climate smart bushels, and then being able to go sell them at a premium and really help to make these markets actually go. I think the elevators got to get their stuff going. We'd love to chat with them, but gosh, we gotta really get ramped up here. My list is getting shorter here, but okay, Paul, wouldn't carbon credits be available for acres that are not planted to corn or soybeans, or where the corn or soybeans is sold into a food or feed market? Exactly. So if your crop is going into biofuel, plan on not signing up for a different carbon credit program, but keep your options open because these tax credits probably are going to be the best financial opportunity. For your acres that aren't going into biofuel, absolutely. There's tons of other programs out there. But just make sure that you're not locking yourself into a long-term contract, especially if that field would end up getting rotated to a biofuel crop. So yeah, absolutely. Lots of other options out there. Why do you assume the ability to not stack sets precedence, but the check the box qualification will not be precedence? Okay, really good question. So from anonymous attendee though, gosh, we need your names. So assume, okay, so his question on, okay, so stacking doesn't set precedence in my mind. It does set precedence that we need to be ready. If it is going to be the bundle and the stack approach, we need to be ready for that, because it did set precedents that they could absolutely do that same thing, which would really suck, but they could do it. But why I'm still bullish on the actual CI scores, that's what they've been saying from the very beginning, that they're going to utilize the actual GREET model, an actual CI score. And there's already been indications, and Vilsack called the rules last week a placeholder. I mean, so everything still in my mind is pointing towards, we need to be ready for the actual scores. Hopefully the actual scores happen, come right out the gate on January 1. Maybe they'll do the bundle approach for a while and then change the rule later. Hopefully that'll be retroactive. But we need to be ready for either one. So and then the not stat. So his question was on, okay, the check the box, I believe, can set some precedent. We need to be ready for either one. And then his other part of the question was about stacking carbon credit programs, being in a carbon credit program and a CI. Why do I believe the precedent on that? I mean, I didn't think that the IRS was going to rule about not being able to stack these programs. 40B is a super teeny tiny tax credit for 2023 and 2024. I don't know why they wouldn't also utilize that same rule for 45Z. That they're saying, if you're going to create a low carbon fuel, you're utilizing that carbon reduction for the fuel. You can't also utilize it to help some corporate meet their sustainability goals. So as I already mentioned, of the use of perennial plants to capture and lower CI score from Dallas. Nope. No mentions, only biofuel producing crops. Teresa, when will the rules be released around 45Z? Hopefully, yeah. So this was all about 40B. So they did the 40B rules. We have zero indication as to when they will do 45Z. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Manure type and application specifics for Climate Smart. Now, so there's manure wasn't even mentioned. We are documenting though, in TopSoil, we would document your species, application date, rates, stabilizers. We'll help you to document all the details on manure or any other application, but it wasn't specified. All right, I've got just a couple more. Let me crank through them. Does this incentive imports of other feedstocks? So I think they're talking about importing feedstocks into SAF. It does not give the same it does not give the same benefit if you're importing feedstock. So like these folks that are importing Brazilian ethanol, they don't get the same benefits, which is what I think good that we're not using the license our taxpayer dollars. Not using all of them overseas anyway, which is good. Does strip to qualify? Yes. Thanks, Dion. So when manure is applied, thus reducing commercial fertilizer, how does it impact the calculation? So in the actual calculation, manure greatly reduces the CI score, usually by around 12 points or so. But in the 40B rules, wasn't even mentioned. But Mark, hopefully they do utilize the actual score for 45Z. Do they define a rate for the ATS as a stabilizer? No. Joe, we mentioned that before. And hopefully get you that clip that they don't mention rates when it comes to the stabilizers. You'll just have to utilize the labeled rates or the university recommended rates. Stan, maybe we separate our CSA corn credits and sell them to an ethanol plant, then deliver our corn to another user of feedstock. We don't know yet on the separation of the certificates and the corn. At this point, I do still think you've got to plan on the certificate and the corn staying together. And when you deliver the corn, you're selling the corn and selling the certificate. They stay associated with each other. But there's quite a bit of gray area yet that we're working through. Nick, can you repeat the ethanol required per gallon of SAF? I believe it's 1.7 gallons of ethanol per gallon of sustainable aviation fuel. Now it's very new. Hopefully they get more efficient, but at this point, 1.7 gallons of ethanol per gallon of SAF. The last question from the deal the other day, EPA has updated the RFS and the RINs that might provide different incentives. But I'll look into that now. So I know EPA continues to update the blenders, the blending requirements and that kind of thing. It will have an overall impact, of course, but for our conversations here, we're keeping to the tax credits. But anyway, Thanks everyone that hung out here this morning. Hopefully there was some good insights on that. I gotta go get on another meeting, but glad to get all these rules cranked through. Be sure to sign up for the TopSoil Summit, and all this will be recorded. We'll clip it up. Would love any of your questions, and be sure to keep in touch. We'll see you all next Tuesday at 7:45. Have a good one.